and then for the last 10 years until joining CFIHOS, I was actually the manager of the engineering data management group down at Woodside in Australia, which is the largest oil and gas producer, independent oil and gas producer in Australia. I've actually been involved with CFIHOS for quite some time. I've been the project director now for just over 5 years, but I've been involved in roles with Woodside as actually contributing to the development since around about 2014, 2015. That's just a little bit about me. Today's talk or presentation is not going to be a technical presentation in how the deep diving into, say, the RDL or the data model. It's supposed to be a high level overview of what CFIHOS is. And I think we've got another session planned where Jason Roberts from who looks after our data modeling group will be giving a deeper dive into the CFIHOS logical data model. So this is a high level view of CFIHOS. So what I'm going to cover today is purpose, what we're trying to achieve, the key elements of CFIHOS, our membership and how we're structured, a little bit of history of where we've been, and then also a bit of directional where we're going. Also talk a little bit about where you can find things, because CFIHOS is free to use. A bit about our MOU partners, and then a little bit about version 2, which was just published last Thursday, actually. Okay, excuse me. So CFIHOS, what does it stand for? It actually stands for Capital Facilities Information Handover Specification, and we like to pronounce it as CFIHOS, but there is various other ways of pronouncing it, but that's our preferred pronunciation. And a little bit about our purpose. So this is our purpose statement, and we're trying to create, or we are creating, a handover specification. And the important thing is that it's a practical handover specification that can be implemented right across the supply chain and right across all project life cycles. So it can be used by not only the owner operators, the EPC contractors who deliver the projects, the fabrication contractors, the commissioning contractors, and in some instances handover contractors, and also equipment suppliers and manufacturers. And we're standardizing the information that is required to own and operate and maintain a facility, and do that as efficiently and as possible, and also demonstrate compliance to the regulators. So CFIHOS is not just contained to the oil and gas industry. It covers multiple industries, and you'll see from our membership that we've got a wide range of members covering multiple industry sectors, because the equipment that is used and the specifications for those equipments is very, very similar across all of those industrial sectors. Another thing, as I say, it covers the whole life cycle, and should be applied very early on in a project and go all the way through from all the various project phases all the way into the operate phase, and also into the disposal or decommissioning phase. And the own bit is quite important as well. So our data model and our RDL covers the fact that you need to procure something in the first place. So it is applied very, very early on in a project. And we are seeing now that it's being widely adopted by multiple industries and multiple organizations, that it is significantly lowering the life cycle cost that's associated with either poor information, poor quality information, missing information, and also inaccurate information. So a little bit about our key elements. So CFIHOS has basically three key elements to it that we publish. The first is what we call our narrative document library, and that's made up of a number of documents. So we've got what we call our scope and procedure document, and that is basically how to define the scope of information management to support how CFOS is delivered. We've also then got our technical specification document. We refer to it as the spec doc, and that's the requirements and sort of the rules and the general principles around the information handover. And then we have a number of process and guidance documents that help owner operators. Currently we have one for principals, one for EPCs, help them implement CFOS and how to go about what good practice looks like in terms of an implementation of CFOS. We are expanding that library, so we're currently developing one for equipment suppliers and manufacturers, and there is also plans to develop a guidance document for software suppliers as well. And that's all backed up by a thing that we call the contracting scenario templates. So when you're defining your scope of work, you have to define the type of contract that you're going into. Is it a concept select? Is it an EPC contract? Is it, say, a feed contract? And that will define the scope of work and the information that needs to be handed over at the end of that particular contract or that particular contract phase. So that's the sort of like the narrative document library and the documents that we've got in there. And then we've got two other key deliverables, and they are what we call the data model and also the reference data library. So the data model itself is quite an extensive model. As I say, it covers the full life cycle of a facility or a plant, excuse me, or a site. And it's basically, it's a logical data model. It's not a physical data model, even though it can be produced as a physical data model. It is a logical data model, and basically it's the roadmap, and it shows you how all the information is structured and all of the relationships between the various entities and properties that we've got within not only the data model, but also within the reference data library. As I say, we've got our reference data library, and it's important to note about our reference data library and our data model is that it is only for information, that we're not trying to capture every possible thing that you can capture about a particular type of equipment, for instance. We are only concentrating on the information, be that documents and data or data, that is required to own and operate the facility and do, as I say, do that safely. It's not absolutely everything that you could possibly collect against a particular type of equipment. Okay. Excuse me. Then just talk a little bit about our membership. So the CFIHOS membership is broken down into 5 membership groups, and those 5 membership groups are actually represented on our steering committee, and I'll talk a little bit later about our governance, but predominantly the day-to-day governance of CFIHOS comes through the steering committee. And those 5 membership groups are broken down into what we call the IOGP owner operators, and they are predominantly oil and gas companies, or energy companies as they like to call themselves these days, that are also members of IOGP. And we've got 14 members that are currently actively involved. And as you can see, there's some of the world super majors that are actually part of that. And then we go on to the other owner operator group, which is people that are not part of IOGP, but they are in fact owner operators. And so we've got 10 companies that are involved there, and they range from the nuclear industry, the chemical industry. We've got a number of chemical companies. We've also got some LNG producers and sort of process plant people, air products, and the water industry like NEOM, and also a couple of power companies as well, Scottish Power and Sarawak Energy. One area that is underrepresented within CFIHOS, and we are working to develop that, is what we call the equipment suppliers and other institutions. So we've got a number of universities that are involved within CFIHOS, and we've also got a few equipment suppliers. But having said that, we could do with beefing up that area, because All of the content within CFIHOS is actually developed by the members. And obviously, as we said at the beginning, our purpose statement is to be implementable right across the supply chain. So we need to make sure that we get the input from the equipment suppliers to make sure that their needs are being represented, and things that, say, the owner operators or the EPC community is asking for is actually things that they can deliver and make sense for them to deliver as part of the supply chain. Moving a little bit further around the circle there, you can see that our EPCs, we've got 22 EPC contractors that are actually involved, and again, some of the world's largest EPC contractors are actively involved within the development of CFIHOS. And then we come to our biggest group, which is a software suppliers and consultants. And that group there is represented by sort of 31 organizations. And as you can see, some of the world's largest suppliers of particularly engineering software are actually contributing to CFIHOS, but we've got a whole range of software suppliers that are actually part of CFIHOS, and they're offering, some of their offerings obviously support CFIHOS. So when you look at that, we've actually got 83 organizations that are actively involved in contributing to the development of CFIHOS. And from those 83 organizations, we have something like 400 plus SMEs contributing to the development. Not all of those SMEs are necessarily as actively involved as others, but there is a broad selection of subject matter experts from the organizations covering most of the supply chain there. Okay, a little bit about the governance of CFIHOS. CFIHOS is not a hierarchical organization. We've come up with this onion model to sort of try and represent how we're organized. So on the outer level there, we've got governance, and that governance is not really a day-to-day governance. It's actually just basically a reporting out back to IOGP through the IOGP Standards Committee and the Engineering Leadership Council. And the Engineering Leadership Council, for those of you who aren't aware, is an organization, or is a group of 12 senior engineering executives from 12 of the major oil and gas companies that are contributing to not only CFIHOS but to other initiatives as well. The day-to-day administration and guidance and steer for CFIHOS comes from that guidance group. So effectively what we've got in there is the steering committee, and that is made up of the 5 membership groups. So with having so many companies involved, 83 companies, obviously we couldn't have a steering committee of 83 individuals from all of those companies. So what we do have is a steering committee made up with representation from each of those groups. So the people that sit on the steering committee, whilst they will have a day job and they will have a home organization that they belong to, they're not actually representing that individual organization on the steering committee. They're representing the membership group that they actually come from. And then obviously we've got then the working groups, and the working groups are actually the people that deliver, and they come from those 83 organizations. And at the moment we have a number of working groups, and I'll just sort of briefly run through them and give you an overview of what each of them do. So we've got the RDL group, and that is looking at the reference data library from a data perspective. We also, our reference data library covers documents, and that's looked at by the documents group. And they develop the RDL content for documentation to support handover. We've got the data model group, which actually develops the data model. And then we've got a software group. We've also got an implementation group. Now, the implementation group is the group that actually develops all of the narrative documents. So they're responsible for developing the spec doc, the guidance documents, and and the other documents that we've got in there, the scope and procedure documents and the like. We've got a marketing team which obviously looks after making sure that CFIHOS is understood, and we're talking to the right audiences, and we're making sure that the messages are getting out there about what CFIHOS is. And then we have another group, which is the name is confusing, perhaps, is what we call the Implementation Guidance Group, and that is actually made up predominantly of EPC contractors. And the reason that we formed that group was because we were finding that from while CFIHOS was being implemented and being widely implemented now, we were finding that in some instances the lineage or the visibility of CFIHOS within a contract wasn't necessarily as good as it could be, say from the owner operator to the EPC contractor. So the EPC contractors have got together, formed this group, and they're providing guidance on how we can better produce implementation or support implementations, particularly from an owner operator's perspective, so that we can actually, once a contract is received, they can actually see that it is a CFIHOS requirement and not just an extension, say, of an owner operator's core standard. And then just recently, it's been going about 9 months, I suppose now, is we've created the the CFIHOS semantics group. And I think Onno is on the call today, and Onno is the lead of that group. And they're looking at how CFIHOS can be used to support semantics, and is there anything that we need to change within CFIHOS to make sure that we're supporting semantics, and obviously the work that's going on with the OBI and the IDO group, developing the latest ISO standard on industrial-based ontologies. So that's a little bit about how we're structured. Then a little bit about the timeline, and I do apologize, I should have updated this slide because the current version is now version 2. I've just noticed that. But basically, as you can see from this timeline, the CFIHOS was initially created back in 2012, and it was under USPI in the Netherlands, and Shell donated to the industry, or to USPI, one of their Shell DEPs, as it's called, which is the ICE DEP, which is around the engineering information specification that Shell was using. And Shell recognized at that time that in order for them to be successful, to have a standard for information handover that was recognized right across the supply chain, even though Shell is a super major oil and gas company, it needs the support of everybody else. So it needs to be much wider than just one individual company asking for that information in that standardized way. So that they then recognized that they needed to do that, and they handed the specification over to USPI, and they created the CFIHOS project. So that was initially in 2012. It took a couple of years for the first version to be published, and that was version 1.1. And that's roughly when I became involved or became interested in CFIHOS, because I was looking after the engineering data management group down in Woodside, and we were looking for, again, similar to Shell, a standardized way of delivering information and data that could go into our operational systems, that wasn't just a Woodside bespoke request. It was using a common language. It was using common classifications, common attributes. So that's when we became interested in CFIHOS, and we actually implemented version 1.3 was our first implementation at Woodside, but that's another story. So over time, there's been a number of iterations. So version 1.3 was issued in 2017. And around about that time, 2018, it was actually April 2018, there was another IOGP project that was running. Some of you may have heard of it. It was called GIP 33. And GIP 33 was about producing standardized handover specification, no, sorry, standardized requirement specifications for equipment. And obviously, when you purchase equipment, you need data in terms of a data sheet, and you also need information to support that. And they call it an IRS or an information requirement specification. And GIP 33 based those information requirement specifications not only on the underlying base standard, but also on CFIHOS. And they wanted to see the acceleration of CFIHOS happening, to support the development of GIP 33. So IOGP suggested to USPI that they change the governorship of CFIHOS and move it over to IOGP to better align with the alignments of GIP 33. Now, that did go through, but actually what it did do is it did slow the development down for a couple of years. So in 2019, version 1.4 was issued, but the transfer of governorship took from initial conversations in 2018, starting in April 2018, all the way through to January of 2020. But once that transition had happened and had been complete, as you can see from this diagram, the cadence at which we started to produce, or we started to deliver content, we tried to adopt agile principles. So when we had something that was of a minimum viable product, we were actually then being able to produce a new version so that the content was available for people to use and consume, rather than having to wait 2 or 3 or 4 years for the next version. So since 2020, we've actually done a number of versions. We did version 1.4.1, which was predominantly just a few bug fixes for version 1.4. Then 1.5 was published, which was a major step change in terms of content. And then obviously we then produced version 1.5.1 in 2022, or we developed the content and we published it, in 2023, April 2023. So that was a story up to that point. And we then started to develop version 2. Also during this year, 2024, what we did as well is we had a roadmap, and that roadmap had about 14 key themes on it that we were trying to deliver. We actually refreshed the roadmap, and we recognized that some of the content had already been delivered. We just needed to go into the maintenance phase. So some of our themes we removed from our roadmap because we'd already delivered them, and we actually added at that point 1 additional theme, as well as removing, I think, 3 or 4. We added the data maturity theme. So these are our key themes that we've got within CFIHOS. And obviously the very important part as well in the middle is doing the maintenance on the bits that we've already published. So I won't go through all of these themes, but one of the things is that we've got the GIP 33 alignment that we're working on. We've got spare parts that we're also working on. We've delivered the data model to support that spare parts implementation within version 2. We're also very keen on standards alignment. So we want to work with MOU partners such as PCA, such as DEXB, such as CII, the Construction Industry Institute, to make sure that we've got alignment in the work that we're doing, and that we're minimizing or eliminating overlap and duplication. And we are working with some organizations as well, CII and say DEXB, about extensions of the data model, so that the 2 data models actually work together and they are effectively extensions of each other. So that work is ongoing. But these are our key themes. During 2024, we've obviously published version 2, which, as I say, was published last month or last week. And we're continuing with the standards alignment because we see that as being very important. We're starting to look at the next release because obviously once you've done one, you want to move on to the next one. And we're looking at maturing some of the content in terms of renewables and obviously looking at the vendor and data and document requirements. We're starting to develop the data maturity model. And what we mean by that data maturity model is that obviously if you've got a class and you've got a series of properties against that class, you don't necessarily need all of those at every single project phase or every single handover event. So we're looking at developing out that data maturity model. We held our annual face-to-face. We ventured down into Malaysia this year. Our face-to-face was in Kuala Lumpur. It was hosted by Petronas, and it was by far the largest CFIHOS face-to-face that we've had so far. We had over 250 attendees over, and it was over five days. So it was from the Monday to the Friday. So it was quite a big event for us. Looking a little bit further forward, obviously we'll be publishing our next release. We're also looking at additional bilingual content. We currently have a Chinese version of CFIHOS because CFIHOS is quite widely used in local industry within China, and obviously when it's a local contract within places like China, the project language isn't necessarily English, and we are looking at additional ones, potentially some Korean versions, and also we've been talking to, say, organizations like SIA about potentially producing a Swedish version as well. But that's less so important because obviously in Sweden, English is quite widely spoken. We're continuing to develop our backlog. As I say, we try to adopt agile principles as much as possible. So we're working through our backlog and making sure that we're grooming that backlog to align with our core roadmap requirements. And we will publish interim versions. We published version 2, and I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of why we've gone to version 2. But we will be producing interim versions as and when we need to. And I think our cadence will still be annually. So that's a little bit about where we're going. Just where to find things. As I said, CFIHOS is free to use. And you can find it on our website, and that's the address of our website. Or if you just Google CFIHOS, it'll come up. And you'll be able to find it on our standards page. As I say, all the documents are there and even previous versions. So if you're working on a contract that isn't necessarily using the current version, you can download the previous versions. If you're members of CFIHOS, you can obviously find it within our team's environment as well. But for non-members, it's available on the website. And as I say, it's completely free to use. It does come with a Creative Commons 4.0 license, but that is a very wide open source license. And the only real stipulation in that license is that you just should acknowledge the source. That's the only thing that you should do there. And as I say, version 2 is now available for people to download. And I'll talk a little bit about the content of version 2 in a couple of slides. Just a little bit about how we work with our MOU partners. So we work very closely with the Standards Committee and the Information Standards Subcommittee, and they've identified a number of areas that need to do work. So 3D model standard, for instance, we're working with USPI and the FL3DMS initiative there. We're also working with the water industry and also, you know, the paper and pulp industry in Finland and in Sweden. Equally, we've got an alignment with PCA. And as I say, we're working quite heavily with the likes of DEXB, USPI with the FL3 DMS, and also CII around data model extensions to make sure that the data models that are actually within their specific domain align with CFIHOS, and where possible, all of the classes and the properties and those groups just extend the properties for what they need. So for construction, advanced work packaging, say construction work package development, there are certain properties that are not in CFIHOS that they need, and what they've done is they've just extended those properties against those classes within their own class structure and their own data model. Yeah, I think that's all we need to say on that. And we are working on a number of other MOUs as well, and working closely with some ISO groups as well. Just a little bit about version 2. So version 2 is the single largest release that we've done within CFIHOS. We've done a number of things, but I'll just cover the sort of like the high level. We've refactored our specification document to support the use of requirements management tools. One of the feedbacks that we got from owner operators and also from EPC contractors is a lot of them are actually now moving to requirements tools, requirements writing tools, and they want to consume CFIHOS in a form that allows them to put that into their requirements management systems. So what we've done with the specification document, it's the first document that we've done this to, is we've actually turned that into a true requirements document with unique identifiers for each of the requirements within that document. So whilst you've got the normal sections, you know, section 3, 3.1, 3.11, each of those have now been turned from sort of like paragraphs into a series of shall or should statements, and each one of those statements has got a unique identifier. So that's our first pass at that. We've actually used a requirements writing tool ourselves to produce the document, and we are shortly to be producing or not only publishing the document itself, but also publishing a neutral file format that allows those requirements to go from machine to machine, as opposed to just being cut and paste from a document. We've also included some specific attributes to support the greenhouse gas emission calculations. It's not telling you how to do the calculations. It's just additional properties and units of measure and documents that allow you to do your own greenhouse gas calculations, particularly around the scope 3 emissions, but it also helps support scopes 1 and 2 as well. We've aligned ourselves as well under this one to energistics for our units of measure. The reason we've done that is that we've in a lot of the units of measure standards that are out there, they actually aren't not necessarily meant for machine to machine transfer of units of measure or recognition of units of measure. Within the energistics, not only does it have an extensive set of units of measures, they are based on ISO 80,000 in many instances, but it also has some unique units of measure that are applicable to certain industries. So we've aligned ourselves with that. But most importantly, the unique identifiers for those doesn't require any special characters whatsoever. It doesn't require any special character sets to be delivered in your databases. It just uses unique identifiers, and those unique identifiers mean that machine to machine transfer of units of measure, there's no ambiguity in terms of what you actually mean when you transfer those units of measure. There's significant RDL updates to support JIP33, and we've also enriched CFIHOS to support ISO 14224, which is around reliability and maintenance of equipment. And the data model has been extended under the sort of like the component model to allow the specific groupings, for those of you familiar with that standard, around the boundary conditions or the boundaries of what equipment is. So that's a big step forward as far as that's concerned. And there's been quite an extensive update to the data models to support all the other work. And there's a lot more in there as well, but they're just sort of like the key highlights of it. We've also gone through when I'll just step back. When we initially produced version 2, we produced a test candidate, and that test candidate was put to the membership for them to test effectively. And we received a number of comments back from the testing, which is obviously the purpose of testing. There was no real showstoppers in there. There was a few issues, obviously, that were identified, particularly by some of our software suppliers or software vendors that were testing it within their applications. But one of the biggest comments that came back to us, which was of quite a concern, was that actually, because we'd introduced some new things within the data model and the data structures, we've actually made it a little bit complex to actually assemble as it was. So if you took the delivery of the RDL as it was, and you looked at it in Excel format or in CSV format, we'd actually increased the number of CSV files or the number of tabs within the Excel version to something like 33 tabs, and that actually needed quite a lot of assembly for it to be usable. And we took that as a very serious comment, because one of the things that we want to make sure is that the barrier to entry or the barrier to implementation is as low as possible. Obviously, there is a level of complexity in what we do, and there is a level of complexity that needs to be understood, but we'd actually increase that level of complexity exponentially according to some of the feedback that we got. So what we did is we sat back and looked at how we could actually simplify the delivery of CFIHOS without actually losing any of the fidelity in terms of what would be delivered in the final handover. So we've gone through a simplification process, and as part of that simplification process, we're now publishing 2 versions of CFIHOS. And one is we're calling it core and extended. It's important to note that no matter which version you use, the actual handover events that happen and the information that's handed over will be the same regardless of which version you implement it. But the core one, what we've done is we've brought a lot of the data model entities together in views, and rather than being a completely normalized model, it's actually, we brought them together to make the assembly of CFIHOS quite a bit simpler than it would otherwise have been. And in the extended version, that is a truly normalized set of entities. There are no views in there, so all the entities from the data model and all the properties and the RDL are normalized, and all in individual tables, normalized tables, and there is something like 38 or 40 of them, I think it is, something in that. But it's important to note that the loss of fidelity is there's no loss of the difference in fidelity of the handover events between the core and the extended version. In that simplification, though, within the core version, what we have done is we've removed all the terminated items. So if you use the core, you won't see any terminated items, whereas if you use the extended, and if you want to see the terminated items, you would need to use the extended version. And also within the extended version, you've got the provenance of all the items that were within CFIHOS. CFIHOS really is a standard of standards. And we keep a reference to where all of the content comes from, which source standards it comes from. Obviously, ISO 15926 Part 4 is one of our key source standards. But equally, if we've got properties that are being developed, say, as part of the JIP 33 specifications, you can see the reference back to that and actually what it maps to within 14926. 15926, sorry, Part 4, and how it maps to, say, RDL2 within PCA. So we've got all of those relationships, but you do need to use the extended version if that is important to you. Okay. As I say, this was not intended to be an in-depth dive into the various elements of CFIHOS, and I think if I'm right, Nils, Jason will be presenting the data model and taking a technical deep dive into the CFIHOS logical data model next Friday. Any questions?
Yes, we have time for questions. So any questions for Peter?
Ola Linden from Siemens Energy. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if there's any the codes that you're using, are they the unique code of CFIHOS? Is that kind of structure itself describing figures starting at 6 or 7 or 4 or 3? What is the meaning of that? It seems to be some kind of a speaking number level of describing the
within the specification document. So within the specification document, unfortunately, maybe
I can see it there. Maybe.
Yeah. So within the specification document itself, what you'll see is that the codes, you'll see the normal chapter and paragraph reference, and then in a slightly lighter color, you'll see a CFIHOS dash SP, which is for the spec document. You will see a TR, which is for technical requirement, and then there will be a unique 3-digit number behind that. Just so happens that they all run sequentially at the moment, because obviously this is the first time we've done it. But in the future, those unique identifiers won't necessarily run sequentially, because if we remove one or add one, it'll take the next logical number. The requirements writing system does that, and it'll take the next logical number. So if we change a paragraph at the beginning and it goes, it's technical requirement number 1, it might be TR number 24. But within the document, it will still have the paragraph number, so it's humanly readable. In the RecIF file that goes with it, or the machine transferable file, it will do it in the logical order as well. So even though the unique reference is not necessarily in a logical order, the RecIF file contains that information that allows it to go in that logical order.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Then we have a question from Harish.
Yeah, hi, this is Harish from Bechtel. So I have a question about the CFIHOS semantics. So would it be in the form of an ontology? And if so, then what would be the kind of format that we are looking at?
So that group has been formed to look at CFIHOS and look at how CFIHOS what needs to be done to CFIHOS from a semantic point of view. Onno would actually be best placed to answer that if he's on the call still. But that group is
I can do that.
Yeah, go on, Onno. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we have made an open source tool that can handle all kinds of taxonomies, and we are loading CFIHOS into that. the only thing that we want to do in CFOS semantics is to handle CFOS, so to make the RDL available semantically. So that means that we are not going to make any software that creates pipes, valves, pumps, and so on of a process plant. Just the standard will be in there, and it will be in the format of IDO. We are going to follow IDO, so the data structure of IDO will be in the. If you take that standard, it has another taxonomy than 5926. And that is also something that we want to address. We want to harmonize 5926 and IDO such that the taxonomy of IDO can follow out of 5926 part 4, the database, and also from CFOS. So all of that must be able to run through a program like a Python program, something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Onno.
Thank you. And Jan, you have also a question.
Yes. Hi, Peter. This is Jan
Hi.
Sletterbakk, Aker Solutions. My question was related to what you mentioned around the data maturation, the indicator of maturity in the design or in the data delivered. Are you referring to some international ISO, IEC, or national standards there in the work you are doing?
Well, that work is only just kicking off in terms of the data maturity, and we're still having a bit of an internal debate as to what the event should be, and we are looking around to see if there is anything that already exists within international standards as well. But there's sort of two schools of thought at the moment. One is obviously the big handover events that you see within projects, from feed to execute, from design to construction to commissioning, those sorts of events. And obviously we need to consider those events, but also there's lots of other events that happen within contracts that require a certain level of maturity. When you're going through the design process and when you're going through the procurement process. So how granular that will be, we don't know at the moment, but there is some discussion going on that, when you procure a piece of equipment, you say you need to have the data sheet, or you need to have the GA, or you need to have this so many weeks after order placement or before this particular milestone happens, say the 30% model review or the 60% model review, all those types of events. So we're having quite a lot of discussion about how granular that should be, and how achievable that is. So I suspect we'll do it in a number of phases. The first phase will be obviously the big milestones because they're relatively easy, relatively simple. But when you come to the other events, they become slightly more complex. And whether we should be doing that or not is still a debate that's going on. But we are looking as well if there's any already existing standards out there that we should be following or we should be pointing to. And in an ideal world, we could point to something, but I don't know of any. If you know of any, please let us know. That would be of a great help. But yeah, we are doing that sort of background work and background checking at the moment to see if what's already exists. Because obviously, as I said before, CFOS is a standard of standards, and we don't really want to invent anything if it's already been done. We just include it under the envelope concept.
Excellent, superb. Yes, no, that was kind of an expected feedback. But will you establish some kind of work group that will focus on this in the near future?
Yes, we will. Yes, so at the moment we're raising the FRs to support it, and then because we've been concentrating on getting version 2 out, but now we're looking forward, and we're going to raise some FRs to support that, and we're actually be creating a work group to support that work. Equally, some of it will obviously go into some of the existing groups, like the data modeling group, if we need to modify the data model, which I suspect we will. And then we most probably have to add some properties to the RDL to support that as well. But we're going to have a little working group looking at that. And if you want to volunteer, Jan, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. And I hope the initiatives like ILAP and other planning activity, which is connected to this, will be a part of your scoping. Very interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. There might be standards you could look at. We can discuss that at another event. I will be happy to come back to you, Peter, about that.
Okay, that'll be good.
And any more questions, comments? If not, I would like to use the last minutes to explain on what we are planning to do now. And
I'll stop sharing.
Let me take the screen. This was what I showed in the beginning of this meeting. As Peter already have said, the next meeting next Friday will be on the CFIHOS data model, and Jason Roberts from Shell will do that. And then the Friday after that, again, we will have questions and answers and discussions, and that will be very much about how we can bring this work forward in cooperation with the projects that are supporting this work. And it's certainly the DISC project here in Norway, and also the Arrowhead for flexible production value networks, Arrowhead for PVN, which is an EU project, and also the ILAP project, which is an ontology for scheduling. So I hope we can get a good discussion on after we have had these two presentations. If you look at the industry that we are working in, CFIHOS is certainly a very, very important initiative and an important standards and important specification, if I might say that. So are there any questions or comments before we close? If not, thank you again, Peter, for doing this, and thank to all of you for showing up, and welcome back next Friday at the same time.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Yep, have a good weekend.
Same to you.
Yeah, Niels, I'll send you the slide pack as well. I know you've recorded the meeting,
so much.
but
that is important. That is very important.
Yeah, I'll do it straight away.
And now I need to stop the recording.
Yep. Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Bye.